They have similar halachos, but nonetheless, there's a fundamental difference between them. So first of all, let's speak a little bit about Chol Hamoed. Interesting, Rabbi Kiva Eiga, very in Shut Rabbi Kiva Eiga, speaks about the following question, which has a result. And the question is, what does a woman do if she forgets to say Yale B'Yavai in benching on Yom Tov? Has this ever happened? Probably, right? What do you do if you're a woman and you forget to say Yale B'Yavai on Yom Tov, in benching on Yom Tov? So we know the Gemara Brachas tells us that if the Yehuda is an obligation, if the meal is an obligatory meal, then if you forget Yale B'Yavai, you have to go back. But if it's not obligatory, if there's no chiyuv to eat the meal, then you don't go back. And that's why there's a difference, the Gemara says, between Chol Hamoed and between Yom Tov. On Yom Tov, if you forget Yale B'Yavai, you have to go back. But on Chol Hamoed, if you forget Yale B'Yavai, you don't go back. So says Rabbi Kiva Eiga, is there an obligation for women to eat a Seudah on Yom Tov? Question mark. Says Rabbi Kiva Eiga, on Shabbos, there's no question. Shabbos, there's a chiyuv. How do we know? Because the Gemara says, just like women are obligated in Shamar, in the Lo Saseh of Yom Tov, so the like was obligated in Zachar, and that includes also the Seudos. That's clear. But he says, on Yom Tov, why is there a mitzvah Seudah on Yom Tov? He says, well, maybe because of Simcha, because of the joy of Yom Tov. But then he says, well, it can't be because of the joy of Yom Tov, because then it would apply in Chol Hamoed also. We know that on Chol Hamoed, there's also a mitzvah of Simcha on Chol Hamoed. And we know that there's a difference. On Yom Tov, there's a chiyuv Seudah. On Chol Hamoed, there isn't. So it can't be because of Simcha. He said maybe it's because of the Kedusha of the Yom, right? Mikra Kodesh. But then he says, well, Chol Hamoed is also Mikra Kodesh. How do you know that Chol Hamoed is also Mikra Kodesh? Says Rabbi Kiva Eiga, because we say so in our davening, right? In Musaf, today's Musaf, you pull out a siddur. I happen to have a siddur on my stender, so I'll pull it out, and we'll see that we say right, Vatita Nanu Hashem Elokeinu Ba'ava Moyadim L'Simcha Chagim Uzmanim L'Sasoyin Es Yom Chag HaSukkos Hazeh Zman Simchoseinu Mikra Kodesh Zeicher L'Yetzias Mitzrayim. Even Chol Hamoed is called Mikra Kodesh, says Rabbi Kiva Eiga. So, says Rabbi Kiva Eiga, there must be a third reason. And for the third reason, it brings the Gemara in Pesachim. The Gemara in Pesachim says, Atzeres Tia Lochem, that we learn that from Atzeres, the whole sugya of Chatzil Hashem, Chatzil Lochem. And based on the sugya, it says that's the source for the mitzvah of Seudah on Yom Tov. And men are chayev, women, no, women are not chayev. We don't know that women are chayev in this. And therefore, says Rabbi Kiva Eiga, if women forget Yale B'Yavai on Yom Tov, they don't have to go back. All right? Interesting chiddush. Do we pass them like this, Rabbi Kiva Eiga? Mr. Burr doesn't bring him. Some say, if he doesn't bring him, well, you see, he agrees. You can say the opposite. If he doesn't bring him, you see, he doesn't agree. So ask your local rabbi for what to do in such cases. In any case, what's interesting for us is Rabbi Kiva Eiga mentions, based on our davening, that Chol Hamoed is called Mikra Kodesh. And yet, I think that anyone who learns Parshas Emor, do we have a chumash? Any variety of chumash is fine. I don't care who the publisher is in this case. Thank you, Avi. If we look in Parshas Hamoed, which is what we read a few days ago, Parshas Emor, which is, by the way, the only Parsha of Moedes. I know that there are others, like Parshas Pinchas, but Parshas Pinchas doesn't speak about Moedes. Parshas Pinchas speaks about Korbanos. And that's why Parshas Pinchas begins with Korban Tamid es Korbani Lachmi Leishai Reach Nichechi Tishmeru V'chulei.
Great.
Parshas Pinchas is not Parshas Moedos. Parshas Re'eh, although it speaks about some of the Moedos, doesn't speak about all of them. The only one which had in Parshas Mishpatim, the only full Parshas Moedos we have in the Torah is in Emor. And if we look in Emor, there we'll find so it says over here, all right. Well, first of all, Pesach. Okay, we can speak about Pesach also. So concerning Pesach, it says, right, Shivas Yamim Matzos Tochelu, Bayom HaRishon Mikra Kodesh, right, Kol Melechas Avodah Lo Sasu, and then also Bayom HaShvi Mikra Kodesh, Kol Melechas Avodah Lo Sasu. So what do we see? The first day is Mikra Kodesh, the seventh day is Mikra Kodesh, but the middle days are not Mikra Kodesh. It's very clear from the Psukim. And exactly the same thing we find for Sukkot, right? We look at Sukkot, we see B'chamisha Yom Chodesh HaShvi'i, right? We say V'yom HaRishon Mikra Kodesh, Kol Melechas Avodah Lo Sasu. The first day is a Mikra Kodesh, and then the eighth day is also a Kol Melechas Avodah Lo Sasu, but the middle days are not Mikra Kodesh. So we have a contradiction. Is Chol Hamoed, is it a Mikra Kodesh or not? In davening we find it's a Mikra Kodesh, but the Psukim say that it's not a Mikra Kodesh. So first of all, we need to understand, what does Mikra Kodesh mean? What is a Mikra Kodesh? Shalom Shmuel. What does it mean to be a Mikra Kodesh? And for this, we have to look at the Ramban. And we're not going to do that because this Chumash doesn't have Pirush Ramban. And we're outdoors. So I'll be able to only say what I remember from the Ramban by memory. What does Mikra Kodesh mean? So many people straight away say, Mikra Kodesh, Kodesh means separate, or Kodesh means designated. And it's not entirely wrong. Kodesh can mean separate, it can mean designated. We know the Gemara in Kedushin says, what does Mekudeshes mean? The base Amud base, right? Mekudeshes means Asura L'Chala Olam Kehekdesh, right? And Toshvos there says, that's Lashon Darabanan, but the main Lashon means Meyuchedes, that she's designated, and we find in the Navi, Kitshutzoim designates a fast day, right? So Mekudeshes, Kadosh can mean designated, it can mean separate. But I think that the basic meaning of Kadosh, and it's borrowed for many other uses, but the basic meaning of Kadosh is something that has the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Something which is Kadosh, Hekdesh, right? Kedusha, the Kedusha of the Mikdash, the Kedusha of Klal Yisrael, right? The Kedusha of Shabbos, right? Kedusha means something that has the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shabbos is a Yom LaHashem. It's a day for Hashem, right? Like the prophet in Yeshayahu says, "V'kidashtoi me'asois chafotzecha," right? "Mimtzoi cheftecha v'daber davar," right? Be mekadosh v'kidashtoi. Kidashtoi because it's there hayom LaHashem. It's a day for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and therefore it has to be mekudash. It's a day which is kodesh. It's a day on which HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence is felt, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence is felt on Shabbos, and it's felt on Moedim, and it's felt in the Mikdash, because Hashem is present in the Mikdash, and it's felt in Hekdesh, and it's felt in Klal Yisrael. When you have the presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in some element of the world, then that element becomes Kadosh. And of course, then it's designated. It's designated to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And of course, it's separate from anything else in the world because of its designation to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But the basic meaning is that there's a presence, nochachut, right? The presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, his, as it were, his manifestation in a certain element of the world, the mikdash, right? The mikdash is the kadosh place, the place where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is manifest in the world. That's what kedusha is. And the Ramban here in Parshas Emor, the Ramban says that when you have a mikra kodesh, that obligates us in two things. It obligates us, on the one hand, it obligates us in avodas Hashem, in setting aside the day for service of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Every day of the week, we're busy with our own things, right? We're busy with going to work, and we're busy with dealing with 101 issues that we need to deal with. And on the special days, the Mikrai Kodesh are set aside. They're set aside for davening. The Ramban uses the word Beis Elokim, right? For spending the day in the Beis Elokim, right? This is a very makeshift Beis Elokim. We're now outdoors, but it's a place that's designated for prayer, designated for serving HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the house of God. So on a Mikra Kodesh, a day where HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence is felt in the world, so that's a day that you spend in davening, it's a day that you spend in Talmud Torah, and, says the Ramban, it's also a day that's spent in eating and drinking, Shiur, be'achila v'shtia, right? That's true for Shabbos on the one hand, right? Oinik Shabbos, and it's true for the Yomim Tovim, for 6 days of Yomim Tovim that we have in the year, where we have a special mitzvah of achila v'shtia, mitzvah seudah. What are the 6 days? The first and the 7th day of Pesach, the first and the 8th day of Sukkot, the 8th day is the Regel B'Kniyat, Shmini Atzeres, Shavuos, and Rosh Hashanah. And don't tell me Yom Kippur, because Yom Kippur would be a day where you would have to eat, but you're not allowed to. So we make it up before Yom Kippur and Erev Yom Kippur. But there are 6 days of the year in which we have Katsheyu, Be'achila, Uvishtia. And why? Why do you have to eat and drink on this day? Because we have to reflect the fact that when HaKadosh Baruch Hu is present, then life is good. When Hashem is here with us, then we enjoy life. Then life is good. It's not suffering. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's being with us isn't an experience of pain and anguish and strife and fear and anxiety. No, it's a time of pleasure. It's a time of goodness. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence is felt in the world on Yomim Tovim, on good days. So these good days are days that we have to sense that goodness, and we sense it by means of having a special celebratory meal. Now let's get to Chol Hamoed now, because I'll quickly look up the Rambam, if you'll allow me to. And the Rambam in Hilchos Moedim, Perek Vav.
Is there time to ask? The eating and drinking part seems relatively easy, but the learning part that the Sfarim talk about, when you have your children running around, it seems like it's much easier to learn when it's not Chol Hamoed. I don't know if it's historically was different.
Well, I don't know about historically and today, but generally speaking, when you have a day of work, when you have to be at work the whole day, now it's true that our work days are a bit different to what they were once. But if you place yourself in a mindset of the regular working man that has to get up at Alois HaShachar, Hanetza Chama, whenever it is, to do a quick davening, to get out to work, to have a full day of manual labor, and then to come back home in the evening, try to find time to learn, energy to learn, waking hours to learn. It's hard. And generally speaking, working days are hard to find time to learn. And it's interesting that your kind of mindset is the opposite. On working days, I've got time, I'm in the office, let's open a sefer. When I'm at home, I've got kids running around. But the basic mindset of, Chazal and the way that you see in Poskim is that, in the Medrash, it says, Lo litnu yomim tovim Yisrael ela lasik b'Torah. Yes. So yeah, you have kids to learn Torah with your kids. Yes. Sounds utopic maybe. But yeah, there is such a thing. Let me read out to you Perek Vav of Hilchos Yom Tov, Shvisas Yom Tov, Halacha Yud Zayin. Well, let's start from Tes Zayin. So the Rambam says, right, just like there's a mitzvah, Kishem mitzvah lechaved Shabbos le'onga, kach kol yomim tovim. Also festivals, likdosh Hashem mechubad. Every Yom Tov there's the mitzvah of Oneg Yom Tov and of Simchas Yom Tov, he says. And he says there's a special mitzvah of being hungry and so on, going into Yom Tov. Halacha Yud Zayin. Shiva Simei Pesach, all 7 days of Pesach. Ushmeina Simei Chag, right? They're all also behesped b'tainis. There's a mitzvah of Simcha on all of these days. One has to be sameach v'toiv leiv. So says the Rambam, in terms of how do you fulfill this mitzvah? So then the Rambam is very busy with the simcha of how do you fulfill the mitzvah of simcha. He says you eat and you drink and so on. And then he says is a mitzvah saseh, but don't do it the whole day long, but only half day. All right, half the day you spend in going to shul and davening and so on, and the other half you spend enjoying the day and eating and drinking and so on. So what do we have? We have the following. We have Mikra Kodesh, right? On Mikra Kodesh, it's a special Mikra Kodesh, the first day and the last day of Pesach and Sukkot and so on. And then you need to have a proper Seudah. You need to have a proper meal, all right? And you are also b'melacha. You can't go to work. Why can't you go to work? Because the Kadosh Baruch Hu is present. There's a special presence of Hashem. You can't do your own thing. You have to be busy with God's things. What are God's things? Davening, learning, and so on. And being busy with God's things is a joyous time. So you have to have a proper feast. You need to have a real meal. That's Mikra Kodesh. But says the Rambam, the whole time there's still a simcha. There's a mitzvah simcha on all of the days of Chol Hamoed. So now back to our question. Is it a Mikra Kodesh or not? So the answer is that it's a partial Mikra Kodesh. The main Mikra Kodesh are the first day and the last day, right, of Pesach and of Sukkot. This is the main Mikra Kodesh. However, there's an element within Chol Hamoed for which it's also a Mikra Kodesh. And what is that element? We find it here in Parashat Semar at the very end. The end of Parashat Hamoed. Then it says as follows. It says, Eile Moed Hashem asher tikruo es Mikra Kodesh. Right? We already know what Mikra Kodesh is. Mikra Kodesh is, like the Ramban says, to do avodas Hashem and to have a seudah and kadsheyu be'achila v'shtia. We know what it means. But says the pasuk, there's another meaning of Mikra Kodesh. Eile Moed Hashem asher tikruo es Mikra Kodesh la'akriv isher la'Hashem. Another element of Mikra Kodesh is to have a special korban, to have a special sacrificial offering for that day. And again, because there's a presence of Hashem, so in the Mikdash, where that presence is the most concentrated, it's the most felt, it's the most tangible, so in the Mikdash, you have a special effect, you have a korban. And Chol Hamoed, even though Chol Hamoed, you're allowed to go to work under certain circumstances, and there's no mitzvah of a seudah, and you don't have to spend the whole day in learning and so on, like on a regular Yom Tov. But there's a korban. There's a special korban, a special sacrificial offering on every day of Chol Hamoed. And where do we mention in our davening that Chol Hamoed is a Mikra Kodesh, we mention it in Musaf. In Shacharis, we don't mention it. What's the davening of Shacharis? To your regular davening, to your regular Yom Chol davening. There's no mention in Shacharis that this is a Mikra Kodesh. We say Ya'aleh v'Yaveh, but there's no mention in Shacharis that it's a Mikra Kodesh. Where do we mention it? Only in Musaf. Meaning that the Chol Hamoed is a partial Mikra Kodesh. There's a Simcha throughout the festival. And it's a 7-day festival. Pesach is a 7-day festival, and Sukkot is a 7-day festival. But the or 8 days if you include Shmini Atzeres. But the 7 days of festival are not the same. The first day is a Mikra Kodesh in the full sense. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is present, is felt, is manifest fully, and therefore you're not allowed to do malacha. You're not allowed to go to work. You mustn't do malacha. You have to be busy with Mimtzei Cheftecha V'daber Davar. You mustn't speak about your own stuff. You mustn't do your own stuff. You do the work of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And you have a special mitzvah of Seudah. And that's why if you forget Ya'aleh v'Yaveh on Yom Tov, you have to repeat the benching because there's a special mitzvah of Seudah. On the other days, there's a mitzvah to be Sameach, V'samachta, V'chagecha, all 7 days. Usmachtem lifnei Hashem Elokechem, Shivas Yomim. You have to be joyous for 7 days. But those other days of Chol Hamoed are not the same level of Mikra Kodesh. They have an element of Mikra Kodesh. What's the element of Mikra Kodesh? It's an element of Mikra Kodesh for Karbanos. That's the expression of the Mikra Kodesh for the Karbanos. What do you do during the day? You eat bread, you eat meat, and you drink wine, and you have a simcha, right? But you're allowed to do malacha, and you don't have to eat bread if you don't want to. In fact, you can go throughout the whole days of Pesach without eating any matzah, except for the first day. Only the first day, mitzvah Suda, you have to eat your matzah. But the other days, you don't have to. And how does this reflect on Rabbi Akiva Eiger? It might reflect, but I don't want to get into Rabbi Akiva Eiger now, even though it's an interesting halachic question, because I just want to conclude with the difference between Pesach on the one hand and Sukkot on the other. Because the truth is that the Chol Hamoed of Sukkot and Pesach are two different things. They have a qualitative difference. The Chol Hamoed of Pesach is because Yetzias Mitzrayim is a big event. Yetzias Mitzrayim, the biggest event of our calendar. This is our national birth. Yetzias Mitzrayim, Mordechai B'Yom Uledes Osach says Yechezkel, the day that we were born as a nation. It's a big event. And because it's such a big event, so the first day of Pesach is a Yom Tov, and all the other days follow on from the Yom Tov of Pesach. I'm sorry?
Like a Sheva Brachas.
Like a Sheva Brachas. Very nice. Yes. Like a Sheva Brachas. The Torah says in Parshas Emor, the Torah says, find it. It says like this. Ele Modeh Hashem v'chulei b'chodesh harishayin ba'abasa yot l'chodesh per abayim Pesach la'Hashem. That's the carbon Pesach. Then b'chamisha yom l'chodesh hazeh Chag HaMatzos, 1 day. Chamisha 1 day Chag HaMatzos. And then Shivas Yomim Matzos Techelu. 7 days you eat matzah. 7 days you eat matzah, but there's only 1 day that's a proper Yom Tov. The 7 days follow on. That's not the case for Sukkot. For Sukkot, it says that all 7 days are Chag LaHashem. B'chamisha asar, it says Shivas Yomim. Tachodu es Chag Hashem Shivas Yomim. Each day is a festival day. Every single one is a festival day. We have to learn out, Tesvav, from Pesach, that the first day of Sukkot is a special day. There's a chiyuv of eating in the sukkah. It has a special quality, and you have to eat in the sukkah in order to be koveah, to fix the whole time, the next 7 days, that we dwell in the sukkah. But every single day is a festival day, and the Chol Hamoed every day has its own korban, right? That's how Chazal learn. Chazal learned from the special nature of the korbanos that every day you say Hallel. Every single day of Sukkot we say the full Hallel. On Pesach, we don't say Hallel. We say a half Hallel. It's not the full Hallel. On Sukkot, every day we say the full Hallel because Sukkot is the true Chag. There's only actually one full Chag in the Torah, and that's Sukkot. Sukkot is the full Chag, the full festival, the 7 days of festival. When we speak about Chag Bistam, without speaking about Chag HaMatzot or Chag HaShavuot, Stam Chag is Sukkot. And that's why Sukkot every single day is a full festival day. It's not a follow-up from the first day like Chag HaMatzot, but rather it's a full festival day. At the same time, there's still a difference between the Mikra Kodesh of the first day of Sukkot and Shmini Atzeres, and of the only partial Mikra Kodesh that we have on Chol Hamoed. We leave it there for today. Tomorrow. A good night to all of us.
We're off in the top around when you move down.
Baruch Tia, thank you, Yumi. Good to see you, always.